decentralization topics and all of that stuff, governance, community development. So looking forward to the conversation this morning. I'm halfway towards a town in Mexico called Querétaro. I've never been before. Visiting different people that are expats and living in these different areas. So I'm sure we can slide some of those topics into our conversation today. Do we have an agenda, a list to kick off with?
Yeah, and we're live. Just so it's clear, this is all being broadcast for the world. We do have an agenda.
Wonderful.
Yeah. We had a guest, Han Ryu from the Korean EOS community. He unfortunately was unable to make it, so we were going to talk about the My Vote EOS campaign. So we still can a bit, but we'll save a lot of the juicy details there for when we get Han, hopefully next week or a future live stream chat. And Waxa, I'll let you say a few words here. I'm going to spam some Telegram to let some people know we're here.
So, Gabriel, I showed you earlier, but we've got the interview that's just been.
Hello, everybody, and
with,
thank you for joining us once again for another
that'll be coming out later today.
So today I'm joined.
That was a really good interview.
With
I'm
Gabriel
seeing
Shaw.
a video at the same time as you're talking.
Yep. So just quickly sharing the intro there because that's coming out later today. Just need to add a bit of detail. So that's good. We've got quite a few other interviews lined up that just need editing now. So we've got the interview with Good Block. We've got the interview with Han that's coming out soon. The Polaris team from our incubator and Lost Diamond from the incubator. And we've got the interview with UX as well about their bridge technology. So lots coming out on our YouTube channel over the next few weeks.
Yeah, the UX one was pretty cool. So it's Guillaume, also known as Gnome, is his screen handle from the UX team. He walked through. It was pretty basic. It was more of the time was spent talking to him, getting to know him, his background, some of his intentions and the plans with the UX network, which is quite good to get his perspective. And then he did do a quick, brief show of the IBC and how that works, which is the inter-blockchain communication. It's pretty slick. I mean, really basic, really, from what he didn't dig into the tech, right? It was just like a UI, and you log in. Basically, you'll have a UX account. You require a UX account, and say in this example it was an EOS account. It was all testnet, but you would use your anchor, trusty anchor, and you would log in, submit the transaction from the EOS side. You have to wait for the finality. So transaction finality right now isn't super quick on EOS. It still requires 2/3 + 1 of the block producers to have created blocks on top of the previous block. It's almost like in Bitcoin where you have to wait so many, is that you wait 5, 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks before your transaction's confirmed. So you could wait 10-minute block time. I think it's around 3 blocks a lot of times. So you wait 30 minutes till it's confirmed. This is similar, except it's only 2-ish minutes. So he did that, demonstrated it, showed that the delay has a countdown, then it processes, and then you go on to the UX side, and your wallet there is also used to receive it, I think is how it went. So pretty slick, straightforward. Yeah. One thing that was cool that I asked him, there's talk, so Stan, also known as CC32D9 from EOS Amsterdam, has a GitHub proposal that I read through not that long ago that talks about increasing this transaction finality to being like 1 to 3 seconds. So it involves block headers and doing something there. So it's pretty cool. And he said basically Guillaume confirmed, because my question was, you're going to create this tech and it's reliant on this current way it works, which is fairly low transaction finality, slow. And he's like, it'll be no problem. They'll be able to update that to be 1 to 3 seconds, which is awesome, because then the way their IBC works is the user initiates the transaction, which is why you have to use your own native chain wallet. So it's not dependent on some third party that way. But now dApps that want to have part of their application, Wax is a great example because they're rate limited at 20 million transactions a day. They'll be able to run part of their dApp transactions on another chain like UX. And if it's 2-minute finality, well, that's not going to be very good for actually like running a dApp. But if it's a second, well, now you can have a second have something jump to the other chain, transaction happens, it comes back, and now that can actually truly horizontally scale and get to this, the promised land of 1 million transactions a second. So yeah, anyway, I know it was pretty cool. It's a good interview. I was happy to talk to Guillaume about that.
Yeah, I've watched most of it. I really like the interface. It's very clean, crisp, simple. And I liked how it had the little timer on the countdown. He was talking quite a lot about the security as well, about the whole process. It's like guaranteed it can't be interrupted by anybody. So I think that security element is key, right?
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, the tech this is where UX I find is so interesting. We see so many projects in blockchain that are pure hype. And it's like, because, hey, price go up. That seems to be this driving, never mind tech. And like, it's like the Bitcoin, that meme with the dude with the gold. I'm here for the tech.
Oh yeah, all the gold chains.
He's all and so at least with UX, it really does seem like that team's ethos is about, like, because even a lot of EOS folks don't know about what this UX thing is yet. And so, and I can appreciate that because they're building the tech, and when it's ready to do its thing, they're kind of on that mentality, if you build it, they will come. And as much as that may not actually be true in crypto, as we've seen with some chains, I still definitely can appreciate that philosophy, and hopefully it will be true, right? They build it and people will come.
And the team are also involved with some of the working groups, aren't they? Is that right? So the UX team are involved in the greater ecosystem. It's great.
They are, yeah. Chuck, well, thanks for joining us, Chuck. You got it. It's like anti-hype. Not going to make any waves until it's real. Exactly. That's and that's deliberate. Like they've been explicit with that in their Telegram chats. But yeah,
it instills trust as well. They're not overhyping. They're not trying to. They're just building. It's great. The way it should be done, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. Gav, you're pretty new to EOSIO. I mean, you're not new anymore. You're here for a few months now. You're getting used to it, but this idea of hype and how it relates to blockchain, what, any thoughts on how you see that in the market? Cause I know you've got a kind of a broad exposure.
Yeah, it's a good topic, and it's one that plucks at the emotional strings, because back in 2017, the promise of Ethereum with smart contracts was to enable all sorts of utility being stuff that the real world can make use of to improve the quality of life in all sorts of different areas. And we had the ICO craze, and it still kind of feels like 2022, we're still looking. There are real use cases. There is a lot of utility. I'm reviewing various pitches that come in for Helios as a VC and the incubator program, and it's still a little bit difficult getting my head around the viability of blockchain solutions that can make an actual difference being blockchain rather than being a centralized data storage database. I think we're still, and I think there's a mentality for developers that don't necessarily have business side exposure or experience. They're so enthusiastic about what the tech can do. They don't necessarily see where it can connect to the commercialization of the apps. And so there's still a very big mixture of ideas and passion and advancements in features and how many blocks we can do and transaction times and the cost per transaction. But until we're actually bringing that to real world business application, and obviously that's my lens. That's the way that I see everything through, because of what I do with Helios and evaluating the project. So it's good fun. Again, there's various pitches coming in. I just got a few notes here of conversations I've had this week with projects. Right, I think you guys, not sure if you've if I've shared this, but one project is to recycle plastic waste to produce wristband jewelry out of the plastic, so that there's a purpose and there's a commercialization in terms of converting waste into goods. And then how that connects, their idea, how that connects with blockchain is that the jewelry itself can be used to redeem an on-chain NFT. And
we lost Gav for a moment. He's periodically frozen, but it sounds very cool to tie this idea of recycling to the blockchain with the NFT bit. It's that's like the when in doubt NFT type of real world blockchain connection, right?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to when we have more assets on chain. So you can just, I can put my car on there, I can put my service history, I can sell my car as the NFT. That's what I want. Looking forward to that one day.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that Shintai will be offering, but potentially.
I don't know. Well, I mean, they're more a platform. So Shintai's they're making a platform that a lot of assets can be tokenized on. So I think their first, at least the first one that I'd heard about, was commercial real estate.
Yes.
So take commercial real estate, physical assets, physical buildings, tokenize the equity, I would assume, in that, and then have various non-accredited investors who can then participate in the ownership and the yield that would come from the real world utility of that. So I don't know in terms of, the tokenizing bit, that will be pervasive, but in terms of Shintai, we're yet to see, right? They haven't really fully launched yet. They're still in, I think, a private beta. So, but it's coming along, and I'm sure, it's going to happen. Like, this is the future is kind of inevitable. It's what Brock, the leader of Helios, says often, right? He's a futurist, and you're gonna kind of keep up with this. The future's going to happen with or without you. So it's up to you if you want to be a part of it. And the tokenization of assets and warranty cards and registration and home titles, and I'm looking at relocating potentially to another part of the world. And one of the, looking at, say, Mexico is one of the options. And you look at, you read about these kind of horror stories of people who buy property, quote unquote, and they actually didn't buy anything because it turns out it was like fraud and there was no title there. And so it, hello world of blockchain, trustless solutions that don't require on these trusted third parties, which maybe you trusted the wrong third party who actually scammed you. So it's, it is the future. It's coming.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully soon.
Where did I get to? Was I halfway through explaining plastic?
You were, you got cut off at the wristband is redeemable for an on-chain NFT.
Yeah, on-chain NFT. So there you can see an interesting mix of trying to connect real world, and there's a lot of enthusiasts, of course, in kind of recycling area. You can look for partnerships. So there's a lot of amazing ideas, and I feel like there's a frustration probably in the industry, in the communities, to have good success stories. And that's what I'm starting to think of how we can focus, of working with projects that can become success stories to demonstrate how the viability and how to connect all of the different parts of the technology, which I lack understanding in, really. The business application and use of the smart contracts, and then the business models and the growth and actually getting it out there and building an audience. There's so many things. Another couple of the projects that have come in just over the past week. So another is a non-custodial cryptocurrency prepaid debit card, and they're looking to build on the EOS blockchain. So the EOS token, because it's widely available on various exchanges, it makes it a good candidate as one of these base tokens for the card. So you can have a Coinbase prepaid debit card. I'm getting sound feedback here. Someone's playing music. I'm not sure who that is. It's not from my side. So Coinbase. So the user can go to Coinbase and have a prepaid card, and then because they've got EOS there, they can actually convert it and use it. But this project is a non-custodial cryptocurrency prepaid card. So the company itself that is helping to launch this card would not have access to anyone's funds. Some of the audience will know that I was head of marketing for a one of the more successful crypto debit card providers a few years ago. And so the idea of it being non-custodial is fascinating. So that's another project that came to us looking for a conversation just in the past week. One more, and again, trying to make a point here. This is a game dApp that wants to build an interface and new features on top of an existing Wax game. So the game is enabled with NFTs, it's built on the Wax blockchain. It had some early success, this original game, and then it's tailed off because they didn't have certain marketplace economics in order to be able to make the tokens tradable, or there wasn't enough competition in the game. It was more like a farming reward kind of. It reminded me of a faucet, like receiving tokens for doing some activity, but it wasn't interactive enough. But this other guy, who also has deep experience developing things, dApps in EOSIO blockchains, he's now looking to create a new, like I said, a new interface on top of that existing game. So my point is that there's so much creativity, there's so much ingenuity that's trying to find its feet within our industry, whether it be EOSIO chains or other chains. I feel like there's a simmering frustration of how do we create these commercially viable success stories to demonstrate to the world that this is the direction we need to go in, and to give us confidence. You know the story of, is it Roger Bannister, someone who ran the 4-minute mile? This was centuries, all the way back to the Roman gladiatorial days. No one could run a mile in is it a minute, a 4-minute mile? 4 minutes.
4
right?
minute, yeah.
And then I think it's Roger Bannister or someone. He cracked it not that long ago, a couple of decades ago. And immediately after he managed to record the 4-minute mile, a whole bunch of other athletes were able to achieve the same thing, right? So we need to get over that hill to demonstrate these success stories, that these business models can happen on blockchains, any blockchain. And then I think we're going to see this Cambrian explosion of commercial activity and viability in business models. So few thoughts there. New pitches coming in, interesting business models. How do we take that forward to commercial success as quickly as we can?
Yeah, that's good. Great questioning. And I think there's a lot of potential answers and a lot of runway to really see where this can go, right? So we brought I've got Chuck MacDonald going to join us here. He is so I'll enter him to the stream. Hello, Chuck. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Chuck.
Hopefully you can hear us okay. Maybe he can't hear us yet.
We can hear you typing, Chuck.
I've muted Chuck. So Chuck, I can't hear anything on StreamYard.
No.
I've muted you, Chuck. Let's see.
Hey guys, sorry, I can't hear anything yet.
We can hear you. So maybe here, I'll pull you and see if you can. Let's remove you from the stream for now, and we'll go back to the three of us live. Everything's live. So we got some questions for Phoenix. Phoenix, let's see, what do we got here? Thanks for joining us. What do y'all think about Zeos development on EOS? So those who do not know, Zeos is a privacy coin, and I don't know. I don't know a ton about it in terms of. I think it's running its own chain though. Is it running a side chain? Okay, we got. Let's bring. Maybe Chuck knows. Chuck, can you hear us? Okay.
Yeah, you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good.
Hey, do you know if Zeos is running its own side chain? Are you familiar?
No, it's running on the dApp network.
dApp network. Okay.
Yeah. It's one of the few use cases right now for the dApp network, and it's terribly exciting for those of us who are holding dApp tokens. But the dApp network has all sorts of services that you can run sort of cryptographically securely on on DSPs, dApp service providers. So they're basically little nodes, and one of those services is virtual CPU, And I think that's what he's really using to do the number crunching for the zero knowledge proofs.
Oh, that's pretty clever. Okay. That's great to see the DApp network get some use because it's been around for a while, right? That project has been ongoing. It seemed great. So, yeah, Wax, I don't know if you guys have followed or know what that is. It's basically, well, it sounds like, Chuck, you could probably explain far more better than I what it is. You've been more, and we should introduce, so before we get going on DApp network, Chuck, welcome. Chuck is a very active EOS community member. You're a level 1 chief delegate, if I'm correct, right?
Yes.
So very active in Eden. You're doing a lot for the community right now. You've got some proposal I've seen that you and Dominic are working on to give Eden some focus going forward, which is something you probably carry into the next election. It'd be great if you could talk about that. But yeah, thanks to maybe, I don't know, any other background you want to give to the audience about yourself?
Yeah. I've been lurking in EOS land for a long time. Not a long time, not from the beginning, but I got into it in summer of 2019. Really grabbed that hype that voice was bringing out. And yeah, one of the first things I dove into was the DApp network, and it's the Liquid Apps created the technology, and there's a big community of people who want it to succeed, and there are digital service providers who have popped up who don't have much use for it right now. Anyway, aside from that, right now I am in Eden. The first election was 5 months ago. We're getting ready for the second election, and hopefully getting ready for what we could call Eden 2.0. So one of the things that Dominic and I saw the need for was for Eden to take control of its own destiny. We've all seen that, Chris. Eden needs to be in control of its own code. It needs to be able to run its own elections. It needs to make its own decisions. There's a process for that using bylaws and everything, but long story short, we need to be able to control ourselves, to control as a group. So what Dominic and I have been talking about was, and I know other people have been talking about taking control of the code base. I know Randall has been talking about that, and he's been doing work on it. What we want to do is just distill Eden down to its essential form, I guess, or its essential tool, utility, and that would be the political playoffs process. And added onto that is the political playoffs process with the ability to distribute prizes for people who win each level, right? So what we want to do is productize Eden, allow any user to come in and basically throw a list of EOS addresses at it, EOS accounts, and run a political playoffs process, reward whoever it is gets on, wins each level, and at the end of it have a winner for whatever the purpose might be. And one thing we've been talking about is using the process to do more than just elect individuals. You could use the process. So, for example, you've got a group of people getting together who want to form something like a DAO or something, right? Or Eden, and there's no mission. There's no mission statement. There's no purpose for being. You want to do something, but what's the reason we're all here, right? You can run this political playoffs process to have elections to elect ideas, right? So each round you have 6 people together to answer a question, a very focused question, like what is our purpose? 6 people discuss that. They elect one delegate from that group of 6 to answer that question for the group, right? And then that person goes up to the next level, and then the discussion just becomes more focused, right? So every time you get to the next level of a hierarchy, this question gets more and more narrowly defined, right? So we could answer any question with it, but when you have a group of people fresh together, one of those things is like, what's our mission, or how are we going to do certain things, or what, very open-ended questions. But at the end of one of those discussion sessions, you could do the work of 10 committees in 3 hours, right?
It's an interesting That's interesting, because so right now, for those who don't know, so the Eden process is this right now, the way we've been doing it is you're selecting individuals. So you take a community, a group of people, you randomly sort them into smaller groups, and they each talk amongst themselves about why you should pick me because I'm the best representative of this group. Or in Eden's case, it was stewards of community funds. So you'd argue your case as to why you're a good, trusted person, and here's what you're going to do with the funding, and here's why it's good for EOS, for the EOS community. And some people join the election and have no intention of moving forward, and they're just moving in that first round. They're going to be sorted with other people, and they're going to listen, and they're going to be a judge, and they're going to say, I like your idea, I'm not sure about yours. They'll ask some questions, and their vote will help dictate who amongst that group is the consensus builder that moves forward to the next round. And you're selecting people. But this idea of using this process to solve a question, I don't know if I'd like to see this tested, because it seems to me you'd have, say you've got 64 people, that's a sweet number, and you break into 16 groups of 4. The math works really well. You've got 4, so 16 groups of 4, they're all solving this problem of the mission statement. And they would pick somebody, I would assume, they would all have to first of all agree on what that would be, and then pick someone from the group who best articulates the mission to carry that to the next round and then be able to move it forward. But then you're going to get these new 16 people who've all taken the time to really figure out their thing. And like, how close, if they don't line up, I could see there being a lot of difficulty in that second round to then, and then the final round to come up with a final one. I'm wondering how many people downstream would actually feel like their voice wasn't heard anymore because their mission statement that they agreed upon actually never really manifested. When you're selecting people, then at least, the people move forward as opposed to the idea. So then you don't have as much personal attachment as someone who's voted for that moving forward.
Yeah. One of the things Dominic and I have been saying over and over again is that we've got this really elegant software in Eden 1.0, and it's only been used once, right? In 6 months, it's only been used once.
It's true.
So there is zero harm in just iterating this process over and over and over again, and using it as a psychology experiment, if you want to go that far. The EOS, the foundation, the ENF, they sponsored these blue papers, right? And Dominic and I released a response, basically an enhanced proposal for how to form a governance working group. Okay, so a governance working group, and that's not something like they've been very careful about. It's pretty easy to identify the leaders for Wallet Plus working group, right? You can find those people, you can put together manually and, top down authoritatively, you can put together a working group that nobody's going to argue about, right? But when you try to put together a governance working group, there could be a lot of hurt feelings there, right? There could be a lot of not hurt feelings. There would be people who are vehemently opposed to you based on who you chose to put in that governance working group, right? So what we proposed was, why not have 2 discussion rounds where you incentivize EOS account holders to come in. You're going to give them a prize for participating in this process, right? So you come in, you have a discussion period where everybody can come in and talk about, like, what is the goal of the government, how can governance change in EOS, for example. They all have a discussion, and then the discussion gets distilled down, it filters down until you end up with a final council of like 4 or 6 people who have a really good cross section of the ideas that they've heard through all of these discussions. And it's not about defending themselves, it's not about winning, it's about, as you said, Chris, you doubt or how do all these ideas filter up to the top council, right? And it's their job. The people who win the tables are the ones who can best articulate the people at those tables, right? The ideas at those tables. So at the final council, you end up with a really good discussion, say a 1 or 2 hour discussion of all the options for the change for the working group, right? And then the next week is, how do we implement these ideas? What are the best ideas for these, right? So our proposal was to space them out by 2 weeks. So you have one Saturday, you've got like 3 hours of this process. 2 more weeks later, you have the next part of this process. And then 2 weeks after that, all these people who participated in this, they are candidates for election to the governance working group, right? So by having these discussions ahead of time, you don't throw brand new people into a process and expect 6 six total strangers to elect one total stranger. You've got these people who are, you wouldn't be eligible to be elected to the committee unless you were part of these initial discussions, right? So you're going to have people interested in being on the committee. They're going to come to these discussions, and then they're going to be voted because of the quality of their participation in the two preliminary rounds, right? Anyway, that's just an example of what the process could be used for. You're electing people, but you're going to try to focus the discussion ahead of time. But there's all sorts of things you can do. Like I follow Russell Brand, right? On YouTube. His trajectory is going like this, right? And he's getting really popular. He's a really good speaker. He's a really clear thinker now. But he's got all these followers, and he keeps talking about he wants them involved. He wants to find out what they're thinking. He wants to get the wisdom of his followers. He goes, he's doing all these tours around England, and he's always inviting people to talk to him and everything. But like, he's got 5.5 million subscribers on YouTube. Like, how do you hear any, like, how does he even participate in reality when he's inviting people to talk to him all the time, right? You throw one of these processes together, 1,000 people come to a discussion with Russell Brand, for example. This is the kind of thing that would be possible with a productized Eden. That's what I'm saying. It's if we could create a DApp that anybody could join and use for any purpose, I think you'd see the real magic of Eden happening there, and anybody could use it. And I mean, you could do it to sort out a student council in a high school privately with no videos saved anywhere, or you could do it really publicly, like somebody like Russell Brand or anybody. Anyway, that's so we're putting together a pitch for the next Pomelo season for crowdfunding, and it's definitely something we're going to build as a public good. So anybody with an EOS account should be able to start this process and run the process.
So Chuck, you mentioned right at the beginning there taking control of the code base, and you've also mentioned hierarchy. These things sound very, I'm playing devil's advocate here, these things sound very centralizing of control. The conversation about Eden having a mission, how far did you guys get? Is that an agenda for discussion yet to happen, or have you actually started to play around with people's ideas and questions about what the mission is?
Well, Dominic and I are on the same page with what the mission is, and I believe it's the same page as the rest of Eden, which is the mission of Eden is to provide value to the EOS ecosystem, right? And I think that's what the delegates have enunciated now.
We're
on board with that.
Yeah, we've been. It's one of the current chief delegates are attempting to have this become part of the bylaws. So the way Eden works, right? There's a set of bylaws that are structuring and the organization, the rules that we follow, and then if you want to change those rules to prevent incumbent advantage. So incumbent advantage is when you're in charge, and I want to make sure I win next time. So I'm going to change these rules and gerrymander the districts and tweak it so that I kind of make sure I'm the guy. So that's how incumbents can maintain their sort of control and their grip, because they tweak the rules once they're in power to reinsert themselves. So the way it works here is if we want to change the rules to the bylaws, the chief delegates now have to propose the changes. An election will take place under the current rules, which we haven't messed with. New chief delegates will rise, and they will have an opportunity to ratify what was previously suggested from the previous round of chief delegates. So no sitting incumbent has the ability to change the rules for their benefit, which is really clever. And so now the current chief delegates have come up with, just like you said, Chuck, the mission would be to create value for the EOS ecosystem. Very basic, very simple.
In terms of taking control, right now the code is in the Fractally repo on GitHub, right? And taking control just means E for Eden to take control of its own destiny, meaning Eden should fork that and make its own repo. That's
of the Eden platform code.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's not like we're wresting control from somebody, because Fractally has said that they're moving on to something else, right? And they're leaving the Eden code as it is, right? So it's now on us to develop it further. And we all think, I think to a person, people in Eden believe that it's something that's worth preserving, right? Right now, it's not even usable unless it's a manual process, right? So at least what Eden should do is take the code as it is right now and make it something that has a front end that that people can use, and make it into a public good that anybody on the EOS network can use.
Chuck, how do you? Oh, go on, Gabriel. I'll let you go.
No, go for it, Wax.
I'm just wondering how you see this integrating with Fractally if the EOS incorporates Fractally. Would this work in sync, or would it be separate?
Well, it's more like a primitive. Like Fractally would be like the polished commercial application version of it, where the Eden process, this thing would be a very simple interface that you run a certain process with, and it's something that could be integrated by any DApp, right? Like anybody should, down the road we could create interfaces, and the tools to interface with other DApps, right? Where Fractally, it from what we know about it, it would be more standing on its own, right? And if this tool, if we just started to perceive the Eden process as a consensus tool that anybody could use, it can get, the thing is, it can get done. It exists right now. All we need to do is put a front end on it and a little bit of training behind it, right? It exists right now. It can exist in maybe 2 months of work. We might be able to have a productized version of Eden. So that's way better than, going through all the work and the waiting for Fractally to happen, right? But also it would act as a test bed for the ideas of Fractally. If we're looking to iterate it more and more and more, then it's something that Fractally would be able to use, the data that would come from it.
Yeah, I think it'll be great to actually see a use case for Eden with direction, so people have an objective.
Totally.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, sorry. So it's kind of clear. Provide value to the EOS ecosystem. That gives a direction. At least it doesn't define what the scope is, etc., but it gives a direction. It gives a meaningful purpose and direction of Eden. I don't know. I try and, I guess, maybe try and reduce things to really simple basics, or maybe it's just me, but how about a kind of a Reddit system that has, where people upvote or downvote suggestions, and then those things become evidently prioritized based on the conversation that happens and the voting that happens, and then those things get pushed forwards by a governance committee to prioritize the backlog of stuff to be done, but making the backlog of idea contributions public, including a voting mechanism. Has that already been considered? Is that available? I don't know that I've seen anything like that for the EOS ecosystem.
It's not. Go ahead, Chuck.
Well, I think that's what Fractally is talking about also, right? They're talking about having 20% of their tokens reserved for social, right? And that's where you would get this bubbling up of ideas, upvoted, downvoted, commented on, and everything leading up to their election process, right? It's where you would get the people discussing the ideas and the concepts, and then the election process would be ratifying those ideas.
It's a bit like decide vote wrap, I think, similar to what you're describing there, Gabriel. So you could have a decide vote wrap incorporated into the Eden process if needed, if that was required.
Yeah, I think it's important. Like, what does the Eden process solve for? And one of them is this idea of rational ignorance, where so it's rational to be ignorant of lots of things, especially in politics when you're voting for an individual, a leader, because you don't know all of the campaigns and all the promises from you can't. And it's rational to be ignorant about that, because there's no reward for the amount of time and effort it would take for you to learn about all this stuff. So the advantage of the Eden process is I don't need to go onto a Reddit board and read all these different comments and read all these different ideas and then upvote or downvote. That's a lot of effort and I get nothing for it. Instead, what I can do is if there's an intention that's trying to be solved for, I enter the election as a conscientious contributing community member. I'm broken into these small groups. And just amongst that small group, we can talk about the idea and the question and back and forth and have our voices heard in a 45-minute to an hour conversation. And then one person moves forward who best carries the solution to that question, whatever it might be. So that's like, it's not really the same. Like there's value in both, certainly, but the risk of the Reddit style upvoting approach is it requires attention and time and Sybil protection. Like who's voting? Are these bots that are voting up or down? Like how do you prevent that? Because that's the other big part that Eden solves for is concurrent Eden elections. Like when an election happens, that first breakout room of all those, that initial community, those calls all occur simultaneously. So I can't be a bot army affecting the governance decisions, because I'm only one human and I can only be on one call at a time. And therefore I only have one voice, as I should. So those are some of the nuance there.
And apparently they have, I think there was a development of deep fake analysis as well at one point, just in case you decided to do a deep fake army. I'm sure they had something in place for that. Well,
it doesn't matter what your face looks like. What matters is the quality of your conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I don't care. You can be an animated bot. I don't care. But if you can speak the EOS language, then you're legitimate. Right.
You'd have to have good AI conversation.
You have to have excellent AI. That's worth paying for that AI. Exactly. It should be rewarded.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Like, yeah, governance is so super important, and again, it's like back to the earlier conversation. We're still even in the blockchain industry, we're still trying to figure out what seems like primary fundamental issues and approaches to being able to bring the new world to fruition. Maybe I'm like increasingly more curious. Maybe I'm going to try and hustle into some Eden voting process, whatever the next round of things are in the conversations, and I'll do the same with Fractally and also HyphaDAO and Seeds is another massive community initiative. I think it's time for me to actually get my toes wet and try and experience what these processes are like hands-on.
We should. Well, Gav, you should join if you're around tomorrow. So you can speak about, like, you just recently interviewed Dan. Very great interview. Right now what's happening, the Fractally team, they've begun trial runs of this process. And there's a really big nuance difference between Fractally and Eden. Eden is forward-looking. So right now, when you're in an Eden election, which you should also participate in, anybody who's not in Eden, join. We can throw a link below. Join the Telegram, the Eden on EOS Telegram. Submit your intention to want to become a member. Existing members invite you. You go through a very quick process. You pay 10 EOS. You're in the group, and then you can participate in the next election. The next election is April 9th. You need to be signed in and opt in, however, by April 8th at 9 a.m. Eastern. So Gav, if you're around on April 9th, Saturday, then bookmark that, and you're an Eden member. So you just have to, and I can point you to the link. We can put that below as well. And you opt in and you can participate in the next election. But those elections are forward looking. So they're all about debating amongst our groups, promising what we're going to do if we win, what we're going to do with the funds. That is very different than Fractally. Fractally is deliberately backward looking. So now every Saturday at, I guess it's 11 now Eastern, I think, because of the time zone change, or maybe it's 1 p.m.
11 Central.
11 Central. Okay. So, so now that basically those are weekly calls that are occurring, and they're more manual. They're just like using a spreadsheet and using Zoom and random breakouts. But now when you get into your breakout room, you're talking about what you did for Fractally or fractal governance in the previous week. So someone like yourself who did that interview with Dan, whatever group you end up in, you should end up the winner of that group, because that is a very, very important piece of time, energy, and purpose and intention that's helping Fractally and fractal governance. So you would do in your room, you say, hey, I interviewed Dan. I spent 2 hours preparing for that. I spent 2 hours on the interview. I did some post work. Like that's 5-6 hours of work. And it's valuable, because time isn't really necessarily a great measurement stick, right? It's the value you get out of that time, which is very subjective and difficult. So if you participated tomorrow on that, you should end up depending on who unless you're with Dan himself, because you can be randomized with him, you should do well. And then people are supposed to come to consensus about the rank order of, which is also different. Eden, you're solving for one person. That's it. Fractally, you're solving currently as it stands for a complete consensus on the rank order of who did what, worst to least, which is kind of tricky because you're like, it's easy to pick a winner. But now you start, who's the worst in your group? That's a little tougher to, I mean, it depends how you languages. You don't use the word worst, I suppose, but it's a different thing to try to solve for.
Yeah. With the Eden, it sounds like you're saying that people, it's relevant, only the ideas that people are putting forward, or at least the person is relevant if they want to request votes in order to get a fund to be able to deliver an actual service or solution to the Eden community for the purpose of the mission, which is to provide value to the EOS ecosystem. If I'm just a person with an idea, how do I submit that if it's not something that I myself want to manage in terms of getting funding?
This is for Eden?
Or is that, yeah.
No, yeah, you could. So this is the other thing. There's two things at Eden. This is where I have a problem sort of with the current Eden, is that are we solving for trusted leaders or are we solving for good ideas? Because there was a mix sort of in the last election. We've seen some people like myself. I didn't really have a good idea. Neither did Lovejoy. Not that we don't have good ideas, but for the election itself, I was running on maybe doing this transparency service. Lovejoy had nothing in particular that he was running for, but he's trusted and he's a good leader in the community. So he was voted in his groups just because he's someone that wherever, so you don't have a project, but we know that you'll pick something good to give the funds to. So even though you don't have a project for yourself, you're a person we can trust. So you're going to move up as a leader who then, so kind of like your idea, you have an idea, you're not a tech, you're not going to build it. But if you're trusted enough and people are like, oh, I believe you, Gav, and you're going to use the money well, then yeah, I'll vote for you so you can try to push your idea forward. Or just, you're a good guy and I think you'll do good things. And in the next 6 months, you'll have like what Lovejoy did. So there's both where then so that's, I feel like I wish Eden was a little more deliberate about, are we picking individuals who can then look for projects to support because we trust they're going to make good decisions, or are we looking for projects? And even though you might not be overly articulate or have great leadership skills, you got a great project. So we're going to vote for you anyway because we want your project to support the ecosystem. That's still kind of
that's where it majorly differentiates from, say, HyperDAO, where you can put a business structure in place and then you can apply or suggest jobs to be then approved, and then you get paid for doing those jobs or rewarded. So that it's not quite the same as that.
Yeah, Haifa will be different. Yeah. There's no election process in Haifa really either. I think it's just, I don't even know how they do it. Stake-weighted voting, maybe.
You can choose from memory. I think you can choose how that works.
So Haifa making their own. They're creating a DAO builder tool, not unlike what you're talking about, Chuck. But it won't have, I don't think, the Eden process. I don't think they've contemplated including that in their system. But they're creating a DAO builder on Telos right now, and people can. I want to make a DAO. Okay, I'm going to make it here, and I can select these governance decision processes and how it works. Yeah.
What I got from your last discussion with Reiki from Haifa was they're looking to have a platform that they can have plugins on, right? So you could have different consensus methods as a plugin. Then that's kind of what Dominic and I are thinking about is offering the Eden process as a plugin for whoever wants to use it, right? And if it worked to for a DAO to arrive at what their job for the their mission for the year was, or their mission for the quarter, it's like, we need to tackle this job, how do we do it? That's the kind of process that could help them find out the details and methods. But
yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
it'll take some work, and I'm not a coder.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you have it lined up, or is that something you're going to hopefully?
We've got a couple of we do have a couple of links, but it's something that we're going to be looking for. It's enough work to pay for a full-time dev for a little while, I think, right?
Yeah. So this is the Pomelo pitch. So for those who aren't aware, Pomelo $888,088.88. starting, I believe applications can start on March 20th, and then the project goes live, second season anyway, March 29th. And there's a month where individuals can go check out the pitches and donate. And then there's quadratically matched, and another 125K I hear is going to come from the ENF. So it's over $1 million up for grabs in aggregate there for those who are. So hopefully your project gets wide support, because it's all about the number of individuals that support your project to then receive a match, the maximum quadratic matching. So
one of our goals also, we're aware that like the Chinese community, the Korean community, they've already forked Eden, and they're already working on their own implementations of it. But if we can do everything multilingually, then it just gives everybody around the world more access to the code, right? So any innovations that might come out of one language could easily be translated to other languages. And it just for the sake of Pomelo also, it would be amazing to have 400 Chinese and Korean people give us one EOS, right? Because it would just that in itself, like 100 people giving one EOS translates to thousands upon thousands of dollars in matched funds, right?
Yep.
It's a very, very, it's just a matter of grabbing them by literally speaking their language, right? Literally all you have to do is translate a good pitch into these languages, and you open up your funnel that much bigger, right?
Mm-hmm. Good.
How many Eden members are there currently in the Western Eden?
405, something like that.
405? 405 EOS? That'll be good. Yeah.
And Eden very much, it didn't dominate it, but it very much shaped the first Pomelo season. The Eden members themselves, you could say we were magnifying the money coming from the network to Eden. It's funny, like the network was funding Eden, and it was also funding Pomelo, but the money that went through Eden acted as a magnifying glass on the funds for that Pomelo distributed, right? So if Eden members got behind something, it really, really raises the value of any pitch. And funding Eden to do this, I think, is something that every Eden member could get behind, and I think it would be really successful. Yeah. And then from there, it's just imagine having the problem of having too much money for a project, right? It's like, okay, well, what do we do now? And the everything just opens up. The possibilities, anything that Eden could think about, we could accomplish.
So I heard that they were thinking about giving an amplification or a magnification of the Eden members' donations. Did they put anything in place like that for this season of Pomelo? So if you are an Eden member, you get a greater ratio.
That's around the trust score. So it's like if your account's going to donate. So I think there's a few things that they've got for this season to add to that trust score. I believe Eden is one of them, because it's guaranteed that we're individuals. So it's like that civil protection. And then they're going to be using, I believe, Port, which was something that was submitted on the last season, which is taking your passport and you can scan it, and essentially it kind of creates an on-chain reference to the fact that this account has a real passport tied to it. So that prevents sort of civil attacks as well. So that'll be used. And then I think they have, I remember Daniel speaking about this, and there's going to be, if you have multiple socials, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, and you tie those to your EOS account that you're donating from, then again, you get this trust score bonus. So I think it's just like a quadratic multiplier. It gives you more weight in that math.
Brilliant. So hopefully the Eden members will have even more, or will have a greater trust score. So will have a greater effect on your project, Chuck, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of Eden participation and donations in the last election. So hopefully we see that again this time around. And also it's curious. So the Eden chief delegates have agreed that we're going to change the frequency of Eden elections to being every 3 months versus every 6 months, which means that now, and that's also the same cycle of Pomelo seasons where they're 3 months apart for a year. So it'll be good now to see this, how many Eden people run an election saying, I'm going to focus on Pomelo and these projects and vote for me. And then the funds I get from the treasury, I'm going to explicitly point towards donating to Pomelo pitches. it's perfectly okay if the people in your room want to give you the votes to move forward with that as your proposal, then that's what it'll be. So I think we'll see a bit more of that.
The next election's in April
9th. So there will be an overlap there where the election will conclude. New delegates will be able to pull their first set of funds, which is 5% of the treasury. Right now, there's 201,000 EOS in the Eden treasury, and it's dripped out at 5% a month, split amongst the different layers, basically, in the recipients. So there'll be an opportunity then for people to have the next election, run on this, and actually see the projects that are in Pomelo, because by April 9th, Pomelo's live, so they'll see what projects. So I'm sure we'll see some people running in the Eden election saying, these are the Pomelo projects I'm going to represent and I'm going to give my funds to.
Yeah, that's great. Good timing.
It is good timing, yeah, and it makes 3 months a nice kind of sweet spot. Some people I think still maybe would prefer to see more frequent Eden elections. 6 months was too long. I agree. I think we need a little more people, more iteration, get more people involved, and because as those who are in the chat, like it's not an overly active 404 people in the Eden, technically in the Eden community. There's not 404 people who are actively engaging in communication and in chat. So rational ignorance, right? Setting in. How many people are in there who don't have time to read every single one of the members' chats? Lots. So hopefully, though, however, they do at least participate in the election, because that was sort of the thing. If you're an Eden member, the only thing you should try to do is just participate in the election. At least do that. It'll take you an hour of your time if you're only in the first layer and you're not planning to move forward. So right now, it would, after 6 months, there's an hour commitment. Hopefully that message gets out and people remember to, but I don't know. It's going to be herding cats. Feels like at this point, right? Can't get everybody in there.
So can we go ahead, Chuck?
No, it's funny that we keep talking about Pareto and the need to fight Pareto, or we need, and it's been occurring to me after watching Eden. It's like, well, Eden isolates Pareto and it rewards like top 10%, 15%, 20% most productive people in the community. But the thing is that it's like fighting gravity, right? It's a normal condition of being human that this principle applies to groups of humans, right? So why fight it? Why not just understand it and sort of even celebrate it? Like, this process is about taking 15% of the people out of the group and allowing them to speak for the group, right? And allowing them to direct funding that's going to help the whole group. Because you're always going to get that 10%, 15% of people who do more work than the rest of the group. And it's not something to fight. It's something to harness, right? And I think that's what going back to governance, you've got all these people, all these token holders who don't want to, I say lift, if they don't know what they can do to help governance, right? And the way that Dan is proposing to just give us half the BPs and we'll appoint the BPs that matter. But it's like you've got people who are willing to work for the network and willing to look out for the best of the network. Why don't you harness the Pareto principle to identify these people and let them help, right? And I think that's one of the big things about Eden. It's not about defeating natural processes. It's about harnessing them.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be good to see people like block producers like US, Costa Rica, who are doing so much and they're still not in a paid position. It just blows my mind. Yeah. And it goes back to what Aaron Cox has been saying. It's time now that we have people involved, we have faces of people involved in the network. It's time now to separate governance from block production, and I think that's the big step that we need to go for. And it can only be arrived at having a body of real people who are actually concerned with the network and who are going to take accountability for it.
That makes a lot of sense to me, separating governance from block production, relating to holacracy, which is a popular system for governance based on socionics. There in holacracy, they use two types of meeting. One is a governance meeting and the other is a tactics meeting, where the governance meeting, it's not to actually be, in terms of, it's funny using the term block producer, more generically, it's not about production. If you're in a governance meeting in holacracy, you're defining roles, you're creating policies, and you're electing people to those roles, but you're not actually producing the work of the organization within the governance meeting itself. So from that perspective, it makes a tremendous amount of sense to me to separate the perspective of governance from producing blocks or being a block producer. I'm curious if there is a list, 2 questions here, list of funded initiatives from the current Eden delegates. Where would we find that clear list of what the projects, the funded projects were supposed to be? And also, I don't know if this was answered earlier. Question is, how from those 400 odd Eden members, how were the ideas originally collected, or how did those 400 people actually have a voice, not just in terms of voting who's going to progress, but what ideas those 400 people have for Eden delegates to carry forward in terms of their projects? Or was that not part of the current mechanism?
Well, it's sort of I think that's something that's been overlooked in the grand scheme of the process, and it's fallen to Telegram. It's fallen to our traditional methods of communication. One of the chief delegates, John Williamson, he ran on producing on building the platform Violet Garden, and it's basically a forum system of voting. It's what voice should have been, he says, right? And it's a forum project for Eden members, is dedicated to Eden members, and it's a way for Eden members to discuss things and upvote ideas and stuff. And it's a very elegant product that he produced, and it's great. Now it's going to be rolled into the Fractally, like the social aspect of Fractally. But you're right. It's needed to have this list of priorities, a list of accomplishments, a list of all these things, and I think it might go back to Chris. You were really keen on transparency for delegates. You still are, but it's something that would be worthwhile having. Is just maybe a final report on the last 6 months, for example, who accomplished what versus what they promised or what they wanted to do versus what are the real priorities of Eden. I think one of the standouts has been EOS support. Randall Rowland ran on it, and a bunch of people got behind him, and he was elected to a chief delegate position. And EOS support is a really great platform. The software is going to be finished hopefully next month or so, and they're hiring EOS community members to do support work in real time, and it's amazing.
So this is a great question, Gav, about how do we check, right? So this is what happened after. So there's been 3 Eden elections technically. There was an initial trial election in May, then there was a trial election in July, and then there was the first official election in October. So at the closing of the second trial election in July, I was a chief delegate, and at the end of that, I did this summary. So basically, it was a full discussion, a full little comment here on the eoscommunity.org forum that spoke about how we wanted to create. We were. This is with Josh as well. He was part of this. We were trying to create a holacracy framework, and then we did. I broke it out. What I promised, what I delivered, how are the funds spent, with dates and links to all the on-chain transactions, so you can go to blocks and check. Everything was transparent. I took the time to do this for myself, for Ami, for Felix, for Josh, and then for the first level delegates. And so I did get comments back from Mark, from Vlad, from Douglas, Hernan, Mel. I didn't get comments back from Khaleesi and Todd Schlossler. So the idea would be that prior to the next election, community members could look at this and be like, okay, this is what people, because irrational ignorance again, right? Who has the time to follow up individually, and where are people posting this, and where's the source of truth? Nothing existed. So I did this. It made sense. Is that going to exist for this next election, I don't think so, because who's doing it? So right now it's like that was one of my promises, was to try to set this up and do like a consolidated source of truth. But that was before I begun working for Helios. So my kind of time capacity to deliver on that campaign promise it got messed up. So now I'm not able to do what I said I was going to do in that first official election. Like I will be a good test case of someone who moved to be a chief delegate. I ran on doing this transparency. I didn't deliver on that as I had hoped I would. We'll see if people trust me in the next election. I don't think I'm going to try to move forward in the next one, but if I did, people are like, no way, man, I don't trust you. You're full of shit. You said you were going to do this thing. You never did it. So I'm not voting for you again, which is fine. That's how this is supposed to work, right? There's supposed to be this social dynamic of trust solving for trust. And if I've proven to be not trustworthy because I didn't do what I say I was going to do, then I should be punished for that. I would love to see Justin Trudeau not voted for next time because he said he was going to do all this shit and didn't do any of it, or right? Like that, there should be consequence and there should be accountability. And so that is needed here. And it doesn't, I'm going to do my own review similar to this same forum for this past 6 months. I'm going to do that. I'm going to encourage the other chief delegates and the individual first level delegates. I don't know what they're going to do, but those are questions that during the election, right, Gav, you could be in your room of random people. Who here was an elected delegate last time? Okay, what did you do with your funds? Okay, prove it, right? Those are the kind of questions that I think are worth asking, because you're trying to now, you want me to vote for you again. Well, why should I? Were you accountable last time? And so it'd be, hopefully people do a little bit of homework and prep this so they can show you a link. And here you go. Here's the summary of what I did. And here's the on-chain transactions on block, because everything's on-chain.
I wonder if it would be worth giving individuals kind of a rating. So if you move up the ranks this previous season, you get a token next to your account. So when you go into the next meeting, you kind of already have a certain level of trust associated with you. I don't know if that would be beneficial or not, but it would certainly give you opportunities like Chris just described to ask more appropriate questions. So that'd be quite an interesting addition.
I wrote near the beginning of the year, I wrote this article on governance in a Web3 world. And for the purpose of this article, I arrived at 4 principles for creator incentivized network effects. That sounds very fancy reading it at this point, but basically 4 principles. And one of them was accessibility. And that seems relevant to what we're talking about here, is accessibility for adding ideas, accessibility in terms of having a say in who gets to implement the ideas, and then accessibility in terms of seeing what has been done with funds or by the people that were voted on. So I like this principle of accessibility. Curious how, like Chris, from your experience of not delivering to the level that you wanted to in terms of your goal of transparency, what might you be able to suggest for the community to like hold you more accountable as part of the process, or for the future person that may take on your objective? Is there anything that comes to mind in terms of how do we provide more accessibility or just more management around that goal?
My intention, my plan was to do a very basic Notion website that I could have tables and I could start a dialogue with individual recipients and maintain a relationship and get updates from them and help them with the transparency. The idea was like transparency as a service, right? It's like, let me help you be transparent, because it takes a lot of work. So I could take that on and I would do that as like a job. And it was like, at the time I was unemployed. So I was thinking, okay, this would be like a part-time job, could be full-time. And I gave my, a $30 an hour wage was what I had kind of just low amount just to do it. And so for the first month, I was like doing work and I've tracked it all. And I did 40 some odd hours a week and I've tracked it, and I'll include that in my eventual summary. I never got quite to the point of starting to do this digging and creating the website. And then, I started working for Helios. So it was just like, this isn't going to happen probably. So definitely my suggestion would be kind of do what I was trying to do, which would create a source of truth, publicize that source of truth, make relationships with all the recipients and help them be transparent and help them disclose what they're doing. The idea was also bigger. I was hoping that and I bit off way more into it. It sounds nice on paper, but way harder to actualize. But any recipient of community funds was my target. And community funds, by definition, as I defined it, was anything that came from the EOS network itself. So anything that the ENF has done, those funds are all community funds. So the intention that I was hoping was to go after every single recipient and have a dialogue and tell me about what you did and what are you doing. And that's a lot of work, though. I mean, it is a full-time job to have all of these checkpoints and then update the source of truth and have it there and do some interviews and like do some content. I think there's a great opportunity for someone to do that. And because there's a lot of work there and there's a lot of people you can speak with. And that also includes recipients of Pomelo funds. So you're getting matching funding from Pomelo. Those are community funds because the ENF during round 1, it was 500K. That's 500K worth of community funding. That came from RAND name fees and now inflation. So every single one of those recipients should be held accountable or at least be followed up with. Because right now that isn't happening. I don't know of a single, I haven't seen any content or anything about any of the first round recipients of Pomelo. What did they do with their funds exactly? And are they going to run again? Or if you didn't reach the threshold they wanted, what did they do with what they did get? Are they sitting on it? Did they use it for something else? Where is that check and balance? And it gets a bit messy if this keeps running on and we don't have that. It starts to get harder to kind of go back in time and to try to provide this accountability. And, to each their own. I'm really big on this idea. I like this idea of radical transparency. And I think our salaries should all be transparent and we should all be let's just let it all hang out and break away these taboos of not wanting to talk about money. Blockchain, trustless, open, let's run with that and let's bring humanity closer together. So not a lot of people, I don't think, necessarily have that view, but it's always been my perspective. So we just need someone else to kind of take that and run with it. Eve recently mentioned on the last on Wednesday on the EOS Fireside Chat about this auditor role. And that was essentially what I was trying to do, was have this auditor role. But it's a full-time job. Someone needs to be dedicated to it. Maybe, take more pay to make it more of an incentive. It sounds like the ENF is going to help support that, but there's definitely an opportunity for someone to pick that up and try to do exactly that.
And perhaps to also make systems that make it more efficient, so you don't have to kind of run around to each person per person and try and get access to each person, but a system that helps to record or take in the inputs.
Well, it's all in blockchain. One thing is, it's all EOS. So the one system it's there. It's just a matter of them as the recipient taking the time to put links to all their transactions with the memo, for example, right? It's
an accounting system fundamentally. We're accounting for the efforts and the contributions and the value and the deliverables from a big group of people.
Welcome to Fractally. That's kind of what Fractally is doing, right? Fractally does that accountability for you because you're backward looking. So you're saying, here's what I did. I would now like to be paid for that. So I'm in this Fractally meeting and we're talking amongst this group of 6 people about comparing what we all did. And now we all would be paid for what work we've done. So that it kind of solves that in a different way. Instead of forward looking, I'm promising to do this. And then you can hold me accountable as I go along. Or I've already done this. So now pay me. So it's like a one-to-one. But even still, me saying I've done something on a Fractally call, how do you want to trust but verify? Right? It's like Gav, you come on tomorrow and you say, I did an interview with Dan, and someone's like, whatever. I didn't see this interview. I don't know what you're talking about. You're like, well, here's the link. Now you can verify what I've said I've done. If I go and say I spent 10 hours writing code for a Fractally, like what Chuck's going to do, you're going to write, you're helping promote the Eden process. So it's just Fractally. That's fractal governance. So you're going to say I spent a bunch of time, and it's like, yeah, I don't really. You did? You spent that much time on this? How long? How many breaks did you take? You playing video games in between? There's some Twitter in there, right? You could get pretty nitty gritty on that. If it's almost. So it depends on how picky people are in the group, but it's this idea of trust but verify that becomes difficult.
Yeah. One thing, Gav, you're talking about accountability and being able to, or part of account is just being able to succeed with what you laid out as your goal. And I saw it happen to Chris in real time, watching all the delegates meetings. And then he gets hired. It's like, oh shit, I have to kind of stop, what you said was I have to find somebody to pass this off to. Right.
That's
And
what I was hoping to do. Yeah.
One of the things that we could do is invite other people in Eden or in the greater ecosystem to shadow. Say I get elected on a promise to do something that's, it's ambitious, right? I'm gonna want to surround myself with people who have that same goal, right? Who want to see the same thing happen. If there was a system whereby Chris could have put an invitation out and said, I want other people who are interested in this accountability process. I want other people to come to me, and we're going to work on this together. If that kind of system existed, where you could have these targets or missions or whatever, individual tasks. So an elected person lays out their tasks, and other people, like in a proper DAO. Proper DAO software, you'd be able to come in and slot yourself into those tasks, right? And then the person who got elected, who's invariably going to be very busy and in over their head. We've seen all the chief delegates, all of them are way busier than they anticipated they were going to be doing this, right? And if they could pass that off to like an apprentice, not an apprentice, but somebody who's shadowing them, somebody who wants to see the same thing happen, it would be really worthwhile for Eden to have a stack of a few of us are talking about Eden as basically a talent agency. We're all going to be working together on this goal of the the mission is to provide value to the ecosystem, right? And we all have different talents, and we all want to work at those talents. And it's something, if we could all sign up to have a talent pool, that way when somebody gets elected, they can draw from that pool. And it was one of the original things that Dan was talking about when he created it, was having tariffs on funds spent outside the community. So if you're going to use your Eden funds, your budget, your first priority should be to spend it on other Eden members, employ other Eden members, right? And then if you're going to go outside of Eden, there would be a tariff on that, basically, that you would have to pay back to Eden, to justify having to go outside of the system.
That makes a ton of sense to me. And again, it reminds me of the holacracy, the idea of having circles where you have kind of a point person for the circle that will go and interface with point people from the other circles. But the circle itself has a specific remit and has people there that are in agreement to actually deliver on certain things. It does make a lot of sense in terms of pairing. And again, identifying out of those 400 people, filtering and collating and organizing their interests, their ideas, their skill sets. It seems like that's an interesting opportunity for Eden project.
Yeah, most definitely. Lots to come. And hopefully later today, I will have a Miro board summary of the bylaws to share and to allow people to respond back with, especially guys like Chuck, right? You're going to move forward with a project that I think is going to get a lot of traction in the next election. So we want guys like you to be okay with these potential bylaw changes, because if you make it to the end, which I hope you do, then you get the responsibility of ratifying them. So we want to get feedback from folks like yourself who are really active, and because if you move to the end, you're like, nah, these are shit, I can't ratify these. Well, then great, we've lied. So we want to that's part of the process, right? We want to make sure that the community is okay with these changes, as opposed to just ramming it down everyone's throat, and or it's 1,000 pages of laws that are going to get right, like the Patriot Act or something. Some of these things that they just pull it out of nowhere. It's like, who's reading all this to really be to object about some little fine print? Yeah. It's like, no. These are basic, single page, not overly cumbersome. That's the intention there.
Sounds good.
I like that as well. Let's go on, Maxwell.
No, Carol.
I like that idea of having bylaw visibility, and this is a project that Josh and I spoke about over the past year, of doing that for local towns in a country, so they can see the local laws that they're being governed by, and then side by side juxtapose that against the comments and feedback from the local town community itself, so that that becomes a transparent and accessible component of voting for the councillors in the local town. So we're localizing governance, and maybe from what we're doing here in the Eden community, the EOS, and what you're talking about with Miro, with bylaws, you know, let's how do we, again, my focus is acceleration and bringing the ideas that we've got, the goodwill that we've got in our blockchain communities, to local real world governance and commercial projects. I mean, it's all such an important kind of conversation, and the topics that we're trying to cover, and how do we then bring that to a mass market as soon as possible.
Yep.
The urgency is there. I feel the urgency, guys.
Awesome.
Right on. Well, we've been going for almost an hour and a half. Any other burning topics we want to try to cover today before we shut her down?
I'm good.
No, we're good. Well, Chuck, thank you so much for joining us. I saw you comment, and I'm like, oh, let's get Chuck on. Chuck,
it's great.
So excited for your Pomelo pitch. I think in advance of that, maybe we can have you on again to briefly speak about that, and maybe even share a screen and walk us through it. That'd be a good opportunity to get more feedback there, because when it's on Pomelo, it's all about getting this virality of ideas and getting multiple people to donate. So we'll try to help you out.
Yeah, fantastic.
Right on. Right, everyone. Well, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy. We'll see you next week. We do this again, same time, same place.
Yeah.
Well, next week I can report back on joining the Fractally meeting, which is happening tomorrow, Saturday, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
And signing up for.
Thank you.
And signing up for Eden. I'm a member, so I've got to go back and check it out and see what the process is to get more involved. So will do. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.